Hunger. This poem Hunger is composed by an Indo-Anglian poet named Jayant Mahapatra. This poem is we can say a very shocking poem, a very surprising poem, a realistic poem. And such a poem was never composed, such a concept or thought, because it has a reality that can be found around us in the area where is poverty, where is hunger. And when such an idea was presented by an Indo-Anglian poet, that was very shocking, because Jayant Mahapatra, he has presented through this poem, he has conveyed the message through this poem, the message of starvation, of poverty, that how much helpless one becomes only because of hunger, because of bread, or because of poverty, that one is compelled to sell out his daughter or her body only for few money. So that was a very shocking concept, very shocking theme, which the readers found in this poem. So Hunger, it is one of Jayant Mahapatra's poems, and it has earned a lot of fame, not only in India but also in abroad. And this poem first appeared in his own edited biannual journal named Chandrabhag. Okay, and then it was published in his book of verse A Reign of Rights in 1976. Later it was republished, means it was published again and again, and that is why it was republished, why it was published again and again, because of its concept, because of its real theme, real message that was given by the poet. And we can say it is a universal poem. Not only there is an Indian sensibility, but there is a universality, because it is always found here and there. So this poem even impressed Bernard Young, also an American poet and critic, that he also quoted the whole poem in the Hudson Review in 1972. Then in 1987, Jayant Mahapatra, he himself again republished this poem in his volume of verse Selected Poems. And it even appeared again in a literary journal in 2010. A literary journal that was Pennsylvania. So we can find very well that how much popular or how much name and fame this poem got. So that has been prescribed in your syllabus, and just let us have a look what the theme or what the idea of this poem is. So hunger, the main theme of this poem is, as I have told you, poverty, starvation and hunger. Hunger which drive all these things, starvation, poverty, hunger, compellness, which always drive the poor to lose their human dignity or to lose their morality. Means one becomes so helpless that one doesn't care for morality. He doesn't even care of wrong or right. So this poem, first of all, hunger, it has double meaning, or it has two sense, and this poem deals with the theme of sex, sexuality and the poverty. Okay, and it has a double meaning here. So we all know what is hunger, but Jayant Mahapatra, using this title hunger, he has given us two meaning, two senses. So it is hunger in the belly, and as well as hunger, we can say below the belly. So this poem hunger, it portrays both the hungers that is in the belly, and the hunger below the belly. And the plot, very simple. There are only three characters, the narrator or the speaker or the poet himself, and there is a fisherman or a father and a daughter. Okay, there are only two characters within this poem. The first is the narrator, who is narrating the whole poem, and the narrator is, or the speaker is, Jayant Mahapatra himself, and other two characters are the fisherman and his daughter. So the fisherman and his daughter, they both were suffering from hunger, and the hunger that resulted only from poverty. So to earn something, to get some money, the fisherman he offers his daughter to the unknown person, to the tourist, or to a man, and the man is the narrator or the speaker, and the daughter is only 15 years old girl. Okay, the daughter is hardly 15 years old, and she is also, she's we can say that she is also so helpless that she sells her body to that unknown person that was brought by her own father. So that is the main plot, or that is the main theme of this poem, Hunger. Now just there are very beautiful images or symbols through which Jayant Mahapatra has tried his best to convey his message. So the very first, just let us have a look at the text one by one. There are it is the narrator. Okay, when we come to this, that here the poet Jayant Mahapatra, he shows off hunger at the literal and symbolical sense by recalling the true incident from the life of a fisherman. Okay, that was a real picture, that was a real story, that was a true incident that took place in the life of Jayant Mahapatra. And it always happened in the life of a fisherman, that was very normal for him. So in order to satisfy his hunger, the narrator or the speaker or Jayant Mahapatra himself, he is invited by the fisherman, by a father, to have sexual fulfillment with his 15-year-old daughter. So what happens here? Let us just go through the text. It was hard to believe the flesh was heavy on my back. It was hard to believe the flesh was heavy on my back. So just have a look here, what kind of phrase, what kind of words has been used by Jayant Mahapatra, that he is taking the help of these beautiful words expressing the lust or the desire of the narrator. The flesh was heavy on my back means the poet uses this image of flesh. Okay, when he uses this word, the flesh, which was very heavy on his back, and it implies the inherent sexuality which was intensely working on the narrator. So it strikes the keynote of the whole composition. It reveals to us that the desire to quench the sex feeling seeks illegal avenues of flesh trade, centers where morality is compromised by poverty. So it was hard to believe the flesh was heavy on my back. The fisherman said, "Will you have her?" Carelessly, means he didn't care of the answers, he didn't care. Maybe that it was his work, it was his profession, it was his routine, or he was very habitual. He didn't care of the negative answer or positive answer, or what that person will think of him. And simply he said, simply he asked, or simply he offered him, "Will you have her?" Very, that is, carelessly. Trailing his nets, as he was a fisherman, and the main work of a fisherman is to cast net, only to catch the fish. But here he is using his net not for the fish, but for these kinds of person who come there, and he offers them not food, not fish, but whom? Their daughter. So trailing his nets and his nerves, as though his words sanctified the purpose with which he faced himself. I saw, again very beautiful symbolical images. I saw his white bond thresh his eyes. Means the fisherman, he was so shameless, he was so careless that very spontaneously he asked, he offered him, and there was no feeling of shame, of hesitation in his eyes. This means that he was very habitual for that work. So the poet expresses the helplessness and conflict of a poor fisherman, and he was inviting a customer to satisfy his hunger for sex with none but his own daughter. And this is why that we find here that a conflict is presented very well, that is being shown in the behavior and in the words of the fisherman. So hunger here present the psychological pressure of seller and of customer, that is here between the fisherman and the narrator, between the client and the seller and the purchaser. Because customer is here. Who is the customer? Narrator Jayant Mahapatra, he himself is the customer here, and the seller is here the fisherman. He is ready to purchase, and another person is ready or inclined to sell the things. So no doubt the language of this stanza is very simple, but phrases, the flesh was heavy, or white bone thresh his eyes, these kinds of images or symbols are used very magnificently, and this poem is also full of figure of speech we find here. So I saw his white bone thresh his eyes. I followed him across the sprawling sands. I followed him across the sprawling sands, my mind thumping in the flesh sling. Hope lay perhaps in burning the house I lived in. Silence gripped my sleeves. His body clawed at the froth, his old nets had only dragged up from the seas. My mind thumping in the flesh sling. Okay, this line we can find here, that no doubt this poem is also a psychological poem, and here we can see very well the psychology, that is the psychological condition of the speaker, the psychological condition of the poet. I followed him across the sprawling sands, because they both were on the sea beach, and now because he was full of lust desires and sexual desires, so this is why that the poet or the narrator, he preferred, there was no option with him, and what he did, he simply followed him, because he has asked him, will you have her? So now he wanted her, he desired for her, and this is why that the narrator, without saying anything, without asking or without interrogating, he simply followed whom? He simply followed the fisherman, and where the sprawling sands. My mind thumping in the flesh sling, that there was coming no thought in his mind, as his thoughts were completely full of his desire, full of his sexual desire. So here we find this kind of psychology. Hope lay perhaps in burning the house. So just look at these kinds of words, burning the house. These words are presenting the lust, the sexual desire of the poet. I lived in, silence gripped my sleeves. He was completely speechless, and he was not in mood of asking or saying anything, because he was burning in the fire of lust. His body clawed at the froth, and his old nets. Okay, just look at this word old. This means that the fisherman was not new in that profession, means that was the profession of fisherman, and and he was very habitual for that. Means before the narrator also, the fisherman, he had trapped many customers, he had brought many customers for that girl. So his old net, now the net, it has caught many we can say here many customers or many such kinds of persons had only dragged up from the sea. So from the seas what he had taken, the fisherman, he had caught not the fish in his net but a customer. So it was the main business, it was the main profession of a fisherman, that he used to carry the customer from the sea beach for a girl only to get money. So the poet describes in this stanza the psychological condition of both, of the narrator and of the fisherman or of the father of the daughter during their movements toward the place of manifestation of two kinds of hunger, the belly generated and below the belly generated. So again we are finding here the helplessness of the poor father or poor fisherman, and Jayant Mahapatra, he uses the image of sprawling sands. Okay, here is a beautiful image, and mind thumping in the flesh slings. So these kinds of words are expressing unstable psychological condition of the poet. And here he also uses an ultimate image of when he says in burning the house I lived in. Okay, to discard or to criticize the shameful act for which he is progressing toward the place of the meanest realization. Means the poet or the narrator is aware what he was going to do, that was a very shameful, that was a dirty act, because he was going to avail of the helplessness or weakness of someone. The fisherman, he was helpless because he was poor, he was feeling hungry, he wanted money or he wanted bread, but he was being used. Okay, he was being used or he was being availed by a customer. But the poet, he was also very helpless because he was also hungry. If the fisherman hungry, the customer or the poet or the speaker was also hungry. So here in burning the house I lived in, again we find here that he is criticizing that shameful act, what he was going to do. So for depicting the father's psychological condition, Mahapatra uses images of cloud at the froth and his old nets. Okay, so you can see here that how many symbols or images or figurative language is being used by Jayant Mahapatra to convey his message, to say many things or much more in fewest words. That was his main purpose, his old nets. So within few words he had said so many things that it was his profession and had only dragged up from the seas. Okay, not the fish but even the customer. So the fisherman, he used to come to the sea beach not for the fish but for the customer. So it means that although the father of the poor girl doesn't like to do the job of a middleman for her daughter's prostitutional act, the father is here being a middleman, and what he is doing, he's just involving his daughter in that prostitutional act. Yet due to extreme unwanted and unfavorable circumstances, the fisherman or the father is forced to do that from the seas. Now, so these lines show very well that it is also a psychological poem. Now the third one is in the flickering dark, his lean to opened like a wound, the wind was I and the days and nights before. Okay, just look again, wound, like a wound, palm fronts scratched my skin. Inside the shake, an oil lamp split the hours bunched to those walls. So now the customer, he is being brought to a hut or to such a cottage that there was burning an oil lamp and there was a lot of darkness, and it was just as the customer entered the hut, he felt that it opened just like a wound. So over and over the sticky soot crossed the space of my mind. Means the atmosphere inside of the hut, that was also very sticky, very dirty, but the narrator, he didn't care of all those things. Why? Because he was burning in the fire of lust. So this poem is a, we can find here that it is a very landmark poem, and Jayant Mahapatra, he is describing again the psychological condition of the narrator when he uses these kinds of word, oil lamp, sticky and wound. So again he is forced, he is compelled, he is feeling that it is not good, whatever he is going to do, that is wrong, that is dirty, that is very mean. But in spite of that, he is forced to continue that. So the poet Jayant Mahapatra, he is describing the psychological condition and of himself, or of the narrator, and when he enters the hut, he doesn't feel comfortable. When he came with a poor and helpless fisherman who arranged for his that is we can say shocking and shameful act with his own daughter. Palm fronts scratched my skin, and inside the shake an oil lamp split the hours. Okay, that is clear that the poet autobiographically, he throws light on the unusual psychological condition of the fisherman and of the narrator. So the poem that is during this entry in the poor fisherman's hut for his shameful cause is presented very well here. So here, that is in the flickering, okay, in the flickering dark, the narrator reflects his shock of the view of very poor condition of the hut, poor condition of the house, or poor condition of the dwelling place where the fisherman and that girl was living. So this is why that he remarks the wind, that is the wind was I, okay, the wind was I, and the days and nights before, which means he came here not as a regular customer, okay. The narrator was new, he was unknown, and he was not a regular customer. He explains that the when he says palm fronts scratched my skin, so he came that is here we find that he came here as an irregular customer, and he explains very well that the local seabed material used in making of the hut hurt his feelings, as it shows highly poor condition and helplessness of the dwellers, the fisherman and his daughter. Then I heard him say, okay, him, that is the fisherman, I heard him say, my daughter. That is very shocking, because that girl he is offering, that was his own daughter of the fisherman. She has just turned 15, and she was a very young daughter, and she was hardly 15 years old. Feel her, I'll be back soon. Your bus leaves at 9. The sky fell on me. Okay, and now this was a great shock to the narrator when he is being asked by the father, we can say here not the fisherman but by a father who is going to offer his own daughter only for the sake of money, only for earning few money, or only for the sake of bread. So now he was so compelled that he was the father of that girl, and the girl, she was very little girl, and he just hand over his own daughter to an unknown person, to a stranger, only for few money. So the sky fell on me, and a father's exhausted while long and lean. Her ears were cold as rubber. The girl, she was completely emotionless or feelingless, because she was not interested in these kinds of things, but she was compelled, she was forced, as she had to earn some money. She was hungry, and she was dying of starvation. So now here these words are used. Her ears were cold as rubber. She was so innocent, she was so soft, that it again made the narrator feel very guilty that he was doing something wrong. She opened her wormy legs wide. I felt the hunger there. Okay, hunger there. That was compulsion. Compulsion that a little daughter, she was so compelled to open her wormy. That is wormy, dirty, thin, because she was very thin because of starvation, because of hunger, because of her little age. I felt I felt the hunger there. The other one, the fish slithering, turning inside. So, Jayant Mahapatra describes an act of silence while contrasting two forms of hunger, and I felt the hunger there, and the two sense, two meaning or double meaning of hunger is very obvious here. I felt the hunger there, contrasting two forms of hunger, that is flesh related hunger and poverty related hunger. So, the narrator describes two kinds of hunger, one physical hunger, in brief we can say, and another sexual hunger. Okay, two kinds of hunger, physical hunger and sexual hunger. Sexual hunger of the narrator or speaker or the poet, and physical hunger of the fisherman and his daughter. So I heard him say, my daughter, she's just turned 15, feel her, I'll be back soon, your bus leaves at 9. Here the poet presents the graveness, the seriousness of poverty ridden hunger that compels a fisherman or that compels a father to introduce his own daughter for the act of shame. That was really very shocking, very shameful. And here she opened her wormy legs wide. He presents the other hunger composed merely as an act of silence, no exchange of words and no feelings. So in these lines, the poet bridges the helplessness of a father with the coldness of his daughter. Coldness, her ears were cold as rubber, means she was completely cold, as she was not interested in these kinds of shameful activity. So here we find the helplessness of a father with the coldness of his daughter, and a process as heavy as falling off sky. The sky fell on me, and as a feelingless, as unexplained act of silence, exhausted while. So here we find the hopelessness in the life of the fisherman and his daughter, blow hard on the very core of human existence. So it is a very shocking poem, very shameful act of society, of a poor person, of their, because of their helplessness, is very well presented by Jayant Mahapatra. So this was the poem Hunger.